Hey, Harry, how's it going today?
It's going great. Thanks for having me.
Well, thanks for coming on. I'm excited to talk with you about your new album, Alone with My Faith. So what inspired that title?
So the title and the song came after the album was done. So I have a manager. Her name's Anne Marie. We've been together since I was 18. So that's, 35 years now. And every time I do an album, I send it to her just because I like to, hear her perspective on it. So she listened to it and she said, "This is a real album about faith." I said, "It is." And she says, "You should call it Alone with My Faith." And I thought, well, normally she doesn't really get involved in the creative side of things, but she's got a good point here. It's a pretty good title because I was alone when I recorded it. I was in my home studio. I played all of the instruments and did all of the vocals and set up all the microphones. And the only thing that was really with me per se was my faith. So I decided it was a good title. I wrote a song and recorded it, and it became the title track.
So that's amazing. And you were talking a little bit about how obviously you were alone with your faith, and that sort of brings me to COVID-19. I assume you worked on this obviously during COVID, correct?
That's right. Yeah. So I was on tour, and I remember, one day our tour manager said, "That's it, tour's canceled." So we went home and just like everybody else, just kind of started piecing things together, thinking, what's happening, what's going on. It was such a strange feeling of uncertainty. And having my studio at home, I decided I would make some music, and maybe not only could it comfort me, but it could potentially give some comfort to some folks out there who are going through something very similar.
Yeah, it's one of those things. I mean, COVID was the great equalizer for everyone, right? I mean, everybody just found themselves in a difficult and different position that none of us have ever really experienced before. And so it's pretty amazing, though, that during that time, you walked away with these songs of faith. How was this different from, I mean, you've done so much and you've created so much music, I mean, across the board. How was this different from other projects that you've worked on?
Well, the first difference is that there was nobody there. Like there wasn't even a recording engineer to say, "Oh, that was nice," or, maybe you should try another version of that or something. I mean, there was no one here. And, you spend enough time with just yourself, it's going to be an interesting experience. It's going to be kind of stream of consciousness and a whole gamut of emotions from joy to frustration to celebration to pain, all of those things. And I've never done an album where the music was helping me record the music, if you know what I mean. So The content of the lyric was actually getting me through the recording process.
One thing about you that's really interesting, and it's really rare, there aren't a lot of people. I mean, you've done everything and you've done everything really well. And that's something, obviously, you're super talented. You've got Emmy, Grammy winner, right? But when I look at all of that, one thing that I'm curious about, and I'm sure this is a loaded question, but how did you realize you had all of these talents? I know you've been doing this for decades, but what was sort of your journey in to entertainment?
So, I mean, I started playing the piano at a really early age, like 3. And I kept kind of playing and studying and working on that. And I guess, when I was like 6 or 7, I started singing. I would imitate Louis Armstrong. That was like my big claim to fame back then. And I did a couple of albums playing and singing when I was like 9 and 11 years old. Then I started studying really seriously, and I started getting into classical music more heavily. I was studying with Ellis Marsalis for jazz, and that's when things really started to open up musically for me. But I was also an entertainer because some performers go on stage, they just play their instruments and they're very introspective, and that's great. Other performers are really outgoing, and the performers that I like to watch, like Louis Armstrong or Freddie Mercury, these were people that were uninhibited. They took great command of the stage, and I liked the idea of that. So I started doing high school plays and musicals. I got experience as an actor. And then all the while I had been messing around with other instruments like trumpet or bass or guitar, things like that. So as my life progressed and opportunities presented themselves, I broadened with it. So I went not only from being a singer and a piano player to a band leader. I did some television acting, some film acting. I did some Broadway performing, then some Broadway writing, and So it was all kind of an evolution.
Yeah, I mean, talk show. I mean, you really have done everything, and it's rare. And one thing about you and your career, and when you're interviewed, it's really interesting. And obviously, here we are talking about an album, Alone with My Faith. This issue of faith, and you've very openly, and I think beautifully, in the times I've seen you speak about it, you've addressed this issue in a fascinating way. What is your journey with faith? How did you come into faith, and how did that sort of develop and blossom for you?
So my mother was a Jewish woman from New York. My dad is 94 and he's a Catholic from Mobile, Alabama. They met, they fell in love. And even though my dad's belief in the church and the rules of the church is very strong, he married my mom regardless, because I think love kind of wins in situations like that. When I came along, my mother didn't want me to be baptized in the church. She wanted me to decide for myself. My dad would have rathered that, but I think, as any smart guy knows, listen to your wife and you'll be okay. So I didn't get baptized as a baby, but my mother died when I was 13. I had been going to church with my dad, and I felt that I needed that sense of community in the Catholic Church to help me, to guide me, because I was kind of lost at that point in my life. And I became officially Catholic at 13. I was baptized and confirmed and continued to work on my faith. There were times, even as recently as, making this album, that I questioned my faith. And sometimes I just felt like, man, I'm glad I have it, and everything in between. So faith has been a part of my life for a long time, but it's also been something that has been this living, breathing thing that I need to constantly practice and work on.
Yeah. And hearing you sort of talk that through, one of the things that comes to mind is I know how difficult Hollywood and entertainment is. It's fast paced. There's a lot going on. Has that been a struggle for you over the years? Because having faith that young and carrying it through, a lot of people, and none of us are perfect, right? You carry your faith and you're going to have ebbs and flows. You're going to make mistakes because we're human beings. But was it a challenge to hold on to faith with fame rising at the same time as you were holding on to that still?
Not for me. It wasn't something that was, it wasn't like I was a gospel artist, who was, proclaiming my faith everywhere I went. I think that's a different circumstance. I was a singer, piano player. If people asked me about my faith, I was happy to talk about it. I sang gospel songs on stage now and then, and people seemed to like it. I enjoyed it, but I never had a problem with having faith in that environment, nor did I have a problem with speaking about it. Like, you hear people say it's hard to talk about your faith nowadays. I'm not exactly sure what that means, because everybody that I know, any encounter I've ever had in my life, nobody's ever said to me, I don't want you to talk about that, or, please, that's offensive to me, or I don't know. I've never gone through that. I love everyone. I love people of all faiths. Not everybody believes what I believe, as much as I may think it's true. My mother was a Jew who believed in reincarnation, and I love my mother. So I've never had a problem with it.
Well, what you just detailed too is there's sort of a loss of this art of being able to agree to disagree and love people you disagree with. And I think that's something that, culturally we just need to get back to. It's normal to have people in your life disagree with you on all sorts of things. And we love people still, and you move forward. And when you've talked about faith in interviews, and I've seen you do that again, it's very natural. There was an interview you did with Matt Faraci a few years back. I think it was 2017. And there was some conversation about the 3 wishes. If you had 3 wishes, what would they be? And I think you said, I would do God's will. I would do God's will. I would do God's will. And you sort of mapped that out. And you said that was the focus for you. What does that mean to you?
It means that, I can do as much as I can, with my life, but, ultimately I'm not in control. I feel like this is God's plan, and I try to accept things that are out of my control gracefully. And I try to make the best decisions that I can, with the things that I can control. It's, I got a lot to learn. I'm so far from perfect as as a guy, as a musician, as a dad, as a husband. You know, I have a lot to learn. And, you know, if I can just do what I think God might want me to do, then if I can stay on that track, I think I'll be okay.
I love that. And so with this album, circling back to that, what's your big hope for listeners? You obviously went through a journey like the rest of us did with COVID. You're kind of locked in by yourself. You don't have the sound engineers. You don't have other people with you. You're creating this music and you have this final product now that is going to reach the masses. What's your goal for it?
The goal is twofold, and half of it's already been achieved because it was sort of cathartic for me to go through this. But the other half, which is the most important half, is for people to get some comfort from this music and to also know that I needed their experience to help me too. The fact that we have this shared experience was comforting. I didn't feel alone. You know, it's not like when you go through a death in the family and, you know, your immediate family knows about it, but your next door neighbor goes on with their life. This is something that your next door neighbor is going through too. And I want this music to soothe if it can soothe, and to calm and heal when it can calm and heal.
And what goes into the decisions you make? Like, obviously it's a big decision to put an album out. And when you start working on it, you may not even have realized that you're going to be sitting here doing interviews about this final product. And you talked about the name of the album and how that came about. And it sounds really organic and amazing, but what goes into your decision because again, you've done everything where you say, and you've done it so well, this is the next thing I want to do in my career. How do you make those choices?
Well, I'm not sure if you're aware of how perceptive this question is. I'm sure you are. But when you said I may not have even been aware that I'd be doing an interview about it, that implies that I was doing this music for myself, not really planning on making a record out of it. And you're absolutely right. That's actually not really common. I think when most people go in the studio, they go in the studio to make an album and to release it, and then they do press, and then they do a tour. This album was functionally helping me through a difficult time. And talking to you is actually a little strange because I feel like this is my journal that you have access to, because this is personal stuff. But I also feel when you read this journal, you're going to say, oh, wait, I get that. I understand that. So this whole process has been something born out of spontaneity and impulse and necessity. So I don't know what my next record is going to be. I don't know where I'm going to be in a month. I mean, neither does anybody really, but I like living like that, because that means you are here, you are present, and anything you do is going to represent this particular moment in time. 10 years from now, we'll be able to look back and talk about it. But right now, this is what's important to me. And that's kind of how I approach everything.
That's great. That's great. So my final question for you, just as we're sort of thinking about, we're talking about a lot of different things. We talked about your faith, we talked about your career, and this amazing album. At the end of the day, when all is said and done, and this may seem like a strange question, but I love to ask people this because I think it just gives a really interesting lens into who people are and what they're hoping for their lives and their careers. But when all is said and done, and your legacy is there, and people will look back at that, what do you want that to be personally and professionally?
Well, people always say, like, how do you want to be remembered? And I say, I just want to be remembered. I love, I think that's just my ego. I love performing and I love making people happy. And I would love to be a small part of their lives going forward, even if I'm not here. I think about what I want my epitaph to be, and I think it's just an entertainer. I love to entertain people. I mean, I really, really, really do. I love to look out and see their faces, and I feel like I love them, all of them. I feel like I'm a human being connected to these people in the audience, and I can't believe that they would choose to spend their money on me, and what an honor that is. I take it really seriously. I don't screw around with show times. I mean, if it's 8 o'clock, I'm gonna be on stage at 8 because, this single mom decided to spend her money to come see me, or this couple is spending their anniversary with me. That's a big, big deal to me. So I just want people to know that I love them and I'm an entertainer, man. That's all I can ask for.
Well, and you shocked me today because you were the first person I've interviewed in a long time, and I interview a lot of people. You were on time. Like it was time to go and you were ready to go, which actually it shouldn't be shocking, but it was a little shocking to me. So I love that perspective. And it's amazing after decades that you would feel that way still. I mean, that is really how you want people to be. I think people get jaded though, and they take things for granted, but it doesn't sound like you have it all. And I lied because I do have one more question for you. So I apologize. But
No.
The final question really is what are the lessons you've learned? Because you've been doing this a long time. You've done so much. What have been the big overarching lessons about life that you've learned through entertainment?
My dad told me a long time ago, be nice to people and be on time. And it sounds crazy, but like, I respect you. You have a life. I have a great team. Lauren's been amazing at scheduling all these things and being so precise. But, you know, I have to enter every situation I enter knowing that somebody else has stuff to do. So I'm going to be on time. And I'm going to be nice because it's so much easier to be nice. And life is just too short. You were talking about people getting jaded. I'll get jaded too the day that I'm perfect. And that's never going to happen. So every day that I wake up, I realize that I'm blessed to be alive. I'm blessed to have my wife and my kids. I'm blessed to have my friends, my family, my faith. And I don't screw around with that stuff. That's the most important thing in the world to me. So, and you have your things that are important to you, and I come at you eye to eye, like equal playing field. And for me, if I live my life like that, then of course we all have tragedy and sadness that comes our way, but you can really make the good parts a lot better.
Well, I appreciate that. I think that's the authenticity of faith playing out into who you are as well. I mean, what you're talking about. So I appreciate you sharing all of that. And I'm going to ask the question. Everybody knows where to go for these things, but where can people go to grab your album if they want to get a copy of it when it comes out?
Well, it comes out on March the 19th. It's called Alone with My Faith, and it comes out on all the streaming platforms, Apple, Spotify, Pandora, Amazon, all of those. And I think they're actually making CDs. So you can stop into your local, store and pick up a hard copy too. So it'll be everywhere that you consume your music.
Thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it.
It's my pleasure. It's great talking to you. Thanks a lot.